Alright, so check this out. We're diving deep into some wild stuff today. Throughout human history, man, there have always been these stories, these conspiracy theories that bubble up from the underground and just make you question everything. They pop up and they create this sense of unease, this feeling like maybe the official story we're all being fed is just that, a story. It's like there's this whole other layer to reality that most people just walk right past. But some people, they can't help but stop and stare and wonder what the hell is really going on under the surface of it all. It's a primal human thing, I think. These theories, they're not just random noise. They're a direct challenge to the established narratives, the comfortable explanations that governments and media outlets hand down to us. They propose these insane, sometimes intricate alternative explanations for massive world-changing events. It's a fundamental clash of realities. On one side, you have the official version of history, neatly packaged and easy to digest. On the other, you have this chaotic, messy, and often terrifying labyrinth of possibilities where nothing is as it seems. It's the red pill versus the blue pill, man, and more people are reaching for that red pill. This whole phenomenon, it really springs from a deep-seated mistrust of authority, and can you blame people? When you see powerful people and institutions repeatedly get caught in lies, or act in ways that are completely self-serving and corrupt, it's a natural human response to start questioning everything they say. It's a survival mechanism. This desire to uncover the real truth, not just the sanctioned version of it, has been gaining momentum for years. It's an intellectual rebellion against being treated like a mushroom, kept in the dark and fed bullshit. People are tired of it, they're waking up. So, in this video, we're gonna pull the curtain back on some of the most compelling conspiracies out there. We're talking about the really serious stuff, the kind of things that could rewrite history books if they were proven true. But we're also gonna touch on some of the more bizarre, out there ideas, the ones that make you lean back and just say, whoa, what if? This episode is going to get wild, so strap yourselves in, dim the lights, and let's get into it. Enjoy the ride. Alright, let's start with one that just stinks from a mile away. The Jeffrey Epstein situation. So the official story is that this guy, this incredibly well-connected billionaire, who was trafficking underage girls to the most powerful people in the world, just happened to kill himself in a maximum security federal prison, the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, a place that's supposed to be tighter than a submarine, and he does this right before he's about to name names, potentially exposing a global network of elites. The timing alone is just, it's insane. It's a coincidence of such astronomical proportions that you have to be willfully blind not to question it. The narrative they pushed was simple. He was despondent, he was alone, and he took his own life. But the moment you start to pull on that thread, the whole thing unravels like a cheap sweater. They tell us the guards fell asleep. 2 guards, in the most high-profile unit of the prison, responsible for the most high-profile inmate in the country, both just happened to nod off at the exact same time. Not only that, but they later admitted to falsifying the logs to cover their asses. So, right off the bat, you have official misconduct and a cover-up, admitted in court. That alone should set off alarm bells for any thinking person. But it gets so much crazier. The cameras. In a place that's supposed to have surveillance on every square inch, especially on a suicide watch unit, the cameras watching Epstein's cell just happened to malfunction. 2 separate cameras, right outside his cell, both failed at that precise moment. The footage from one was declared unusable, and the other camera, well, it just had corrupted data from that specific time frame. What are the odds of that? It's like a scene from a bad spy movie where the hero conveniently finds the security feed is just static. Except this isn't a movie, this is real life, and a key witness in a massive conspiracy is dead. And then you have the autopsy. The official coroner ruled it a suicide by hanging. But Dr. Michael Baden, a world-renowned forensic pathologist hired by Epstein's own family to observe the autopsy, came out and said the injuries were far more consistent with homicidal strangulation than hanging. He pointed to multiple fractures in the hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage, things you rarely see in a typical hanging. So you have a medical expert, one of the best in the field, directly contradicting the official cause of death. You have sleeping guards, falsified logs, and broken cameras. At what point do you stop calling it a conspiracy theory and start calling it a mountain of evidence? So let's talk about the video footage, because this is where the story goes from suspicious to just straight up absurd. Initially, the Department of Justice, the highest law enforcement body in the country, tells everyone that the footage from outside Epstein's cell on the night he died was permanently deleted. They claimed it happened because of a clerical error. Think about that for a second. The single most important piece of evidence in the most high-profile prison death in modern history was accidentally erased because someone checked the wrong box on a form or mislabeled a file. It's an explanation so insulting to our intelligence it's actually breathtaking. This wasn't just some random piece of tape. This was the Holy Grail. It would have shown who, if anyone, approached Epstein's cell that night. It would have shown the guards' activities, or lack thereof. It was the one thing that could have definitively proven or disproven the official suicide narrative, and it's just gone. Poof. Vanished into thin air because of a bureaucratic oopsie. This is the kind of excuse you'd expect from a teenager trying to explain a dent in the family car, not the United States Department of Justice. The level of incompetence required for that to be true is staggering, or it's a lie. And one of those is far more likely than the other. Then the story changes. After months of public outrage and legal pressure, federal prosecutors suddenly found the missing footage. It's a miracle. They announced in court that they had located the video that they had previously sworn was gone forever. They blamed the confusion on a technical glitch in their evidence tracking system. So, first it was a clerical error, now it's a computer bug. They can't even keep their excuses straight. This constant shifting of the narrative is a massive red flag. It's what people do when they're caught in a lie and are trying to backpedal and create a new story that fits the facts they can no longer deny. But here's the kicker, even after they found the video, what did it show? Nothing. They released a statement saying the footage doesn't show anyone entering the area of Epstein's cell during the time in question. But they've never released the full, unedited footage to the public. We're just supposed to take their word for it. The same people who told us it was deleted, then told us it was found, are now telling us there's nothing to see here. It's a masterclass in obfuscation. They create a shell game with the evidence, moving it around, making contradictory claims, until the public is so confused and exhausted that they just give up. It's a strategy, and it's deeply, deeply corrupt. You can't talk about Epstein's death without talking about who he was connected to. This wasn't just some random creep. This guy was a node in a network of immense power and influence. His infamous little black book was a Rolodex of the global elite presidents, princes, prime ministers, Wall Street titans, tech billionaires, academics. We're talking about people who run the world, and Epstein had dirt on them. He wasn't just partying with these people, he was allegedly blackmailing them. The entire operation on his island was designed to compromise powerful men, to get them on tape with underage girls, creating leverage that could be used for decades. So when he gets arrested, it's not just his freedom on the line. It's the reputations, careers, and freedom of dozens, maybe hundreds of the most powerful people on the planet. A trial would have been a nuclear bomb detonating in the heart of the global establishment. The witness list alone would have been a who's who of power brokers. The testimony would have exposed a level of rot and corruption that would have shaken society to its core. His death wasn't just convenient for him, it was a godsend for every single person who ever stepped foot on his island or his private jet, the Lolita Express. Think about the motive. Who had the most to lose if Jeffrey Epstein started talking? The list is enormous. It's a conspiracy that doesn't require some shadowy cabal of men in a dark room. It just requires a group of powerful individuals with a shared existential interest in silencing one man. They have the resources, the connections, and the ability to operate outside the normal constraints of the law. Pulling strings inside a federal prison? For people at that level, that's not a challenge. It's just a matter of making a few phone calls. The idea that he was left vulnerable by accident is far more unbelievable than the idea that he was left vulnerable on purpose. Ultimately, the Epstein case is a chilling look at how power functions in the modern world. It suggests that there is a level of influence so great that it can literally get away with murder, even within the walls of a federal institution. It shows how the system can be manipulated to protect the powerful and bury the truth. The guards who fell asleep got a slap on the wrist, the cameras malfunctioned without explanation, the evidence was lost and then found, and the man at the center of it all is dead. The case is officially closed, but the questions remain, and they point to a conclusion that is as terrifying as it is logical. Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. Now we get into something that's incredibly heavy, and it's one of the darkest moments in American history. September 11th. The official story is that 19 terrorists, with almost no support, outsmarted the entire multi-trillion-dollar U.S. intelligence apparatus and pulled off the most devastating attack on American soil. It was portrayed as a colossal intelligence failure, a case of not being able to connect the dots. But when you dig into the declassified documents and the testimony that came out years later, a different picture emerges. It's not that the dots weren't there, it's that they were actively ignored, and in some cases even suppressed by people in positions of power. Let's start with the Phoenix Memo. This was a document written in July 2001, just 2 months before the attacks, by an FBI agent in Phoenix, Arizona, named Kenneth Williams. This guy wasn't some rookie. He was a seasoned counterterrorism agent. He wrote a detailed memo to FBI headquarters warning that a coordinated effort was underway by Osama bin Laden to send students to the United States to attend civil aviation schools. He had been investigating a group of Middle Eastern men who were taking flight lessons in Arizona, and he found their behavior deeply suspicious. He suspected they were part of a larger plot. Williams's memo was incredibly specific. He urged headquarters to canvass all the flight schools in the country to identify any other individuals with similar profiles. He literally laid out the blueprint for the 9/11 plot terrorists using flight schools as training grounds. He wasn't just guessing, he had evidence, he had names, he had a pattern. This memo should have set off a 5-alarm fire throughout the entire intelligence community. It should have been on the president's desk the next morning. It was a clear and present warning written in plain English from an agent on the ground who knew what he was looking at. But what happened to the Phoenix Memo? It went nowhere. It got buried in the bureaucracy of FBI headquarters. It was dismissed by senior officials as speculative, not worth the resources to follow up on. No national alert was sent out, no canvassing of flight schools was ever ordered. The memo, which could have potentially unraveled the entire 9/11 plot before it ever happened, was effectively put in a filing cabinet to collect dust until it was too late. This wasn't a failure to connect the dots. This was a deliberate decision not to even look at the dots. It's a level of incompetence so profound that it borders on criminal negligence or something far worse. If the Phoenix Memo wasn't enough, let's go to Minnesota. In August 2001, just weeks before the attacks, another flight school, the Pan Am International Flight Academy, called the FBI. They were concerned about one of their students, a French-Moroccan man named Zacarias Moussaoui. This guy had paid thousands of dollars in cash for simulator training on a Boeing 747, a massive commercial airliner. The strange thing was, he showed no interest in learning how to take off or land. He was only interested in learning how to steer the plane in mid-air. The flight instructors were so alarmed they thought he might be planning to fly a plane into a building. So, the FBI shows up and they arrest Moussaoui on an immigration violation. The agents on the ground in Minnesota immediately recognized the danger. They were convinced he was a terrorist planning an attack. They worked frantically, trying to get a warrant to search his laptop and his personal belongings. They believed the information on that computer could be the key to stopping a major plot. They sent an urgent request to FBI headquarters, pleading for a warrant under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. They literally told their superiors, "We're trying to prevent this guy from flying a plane into the World Trade Center," but their request was shut down. The supervisory special agent at FBI headquarters, a guy named Michael Maltby, blocked the warrant. He edited the agent's request, removing key information, and then denied it, claiming there wasn't enough probable cause to connect Moussaoui to a foreign power or terrorist group. This, despite the fact that French intelligence had already confirmed Moussaoui had ties to radical Islamic groups. The Minnesota agents were furious. One of them, Harry Samet, wrote that he felt like he was trying to get a battleship to turn. He knew a disaster was imminent, but the chain of command was actively preventing him from stopping it. This is the part that's just chilling. For weeks, the Minnesota FBI field office begged and pleaded with headquarters to let them search Moussaoui's computer. They were stonewalled at every turn. That laptop sat in an evidence locker unopened, while the clock ticked down to September 11th. After the attacks, when they finally got the warrant, they found information that could have potentially led them to some of the other hijackers. The failure to get that warrant wasn't just a bureaucratic fumble. It was a direct, active refusal by a senior FBI official to pursue a credible, urgent terrorist threat. Why would they do that? That's the billion-dollar question. The story gets even more disturbing when you look at two of the key hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. These guys weren't ghosts. The CIA was tracking them as early as 1999. They knew these men were dangerous al-Qaeda operatives. In January 2000, the CIA monitored a major al-Qaeda summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. They photographed al-Midar and al-Hazmi at this meeting. After the meeting, the CIA tracked them as they flew to the United States. They knew these two known terrorists had entered the country on valid visas. This is where it defies all logic. The CIA knew that two high-level al-Qaeda operatives were inside the United States. Standard procedure, basic common sense dictates that they immediately notify the FBI, whose job it is to track domestic threats. The FBI could have put them under surveillance, tracked their contacts, and potentially uncovered the entire 9/11 network. But the CIA didn't. For over a year and a half, from January 2000 until late August 2001, the CIA deliberately withheld this critical information from the FBI. They put these two names on a watch list to prevent them from leaving the country. But they didn't tell the one agency that could actually find them. It wasn't until August 23, 2001, less than 3 weeks before the attacks, that the CIA finally informed the FBI that these two terrorists were in the country. By then, it was way too late. The FBI launched a frantic, last-minute search, but al-Midar and al-Hazmi had gone to ground. They had already moved to San Diego, taken flight lessons, and were preparing to board American Airlines Flight 77, the plane that would hit the Pentagon. The failure to share this information is perhaps the single most damning piece of evidence of a cover-up. It's not incompetence, it's a conscious decision to let known terrorists operate freely inside the United States. So you have the Phoenix memo, detailing the flight school plot, being ignored. You have the Minnesota agents being blocked from investigating a hijacker they had in custody. And you have the CIA hiding the presence of two key hijackers from the FBI for 18 months. When you put it all together, the intelligence failure narrative completely collapses. It looks less like a failure and more like a controlled demolition. It suggests that certain elements within the US intelligence community knew an attack was coming, knew who was involved, and for reasons we still don't fully understand, allowed it to happen. It's a terrifying possibility, but it's the one that best fits the facts. Alright, so let's get into some really wild, kinda dark stuff from history, man. We're talking about a time when science and medicine were just starting to figure things out, but they were running into some, let's call them supply chain issues. We're heading back to 19th century Edinburgh, Scotland. This place was like the Harvard of medicine back then, a real hub for brilliant minds trying to understand the human body. But here's the problem. The central problem that kicks this whole crazy story off. To learn about anatomy, you need bodies to dissect. You need to see the machinery up close, you know? But the law back then was super restrictive. They could only legally get their hands on the bodies of executed criminals. Now, you can imagine, even back then, they weren't executing enough people to keep up with the demand from all these anatomy schools. It's a simple numbers game, right? You've got hundreds of eager students, brilliant professors pushing the boundaries of knowledge, and they're all bottlenecked by this one tiny legal source of cadavers. So what happens when demand completely outstrips the legal supply? You get a black market, and the commodity on this black market wasn't gold or spices, man, it was human corpses. It's insane to even think about. A whole underground economy sprung up around digging up the recently deceased. These guys were called resurrectionists, which is a fancy name for a grave robber. So you have these resurrectionists, these body snatchers, creeping into graveyards in the dead of night, armed with shovels and probably a lot of whiskey, I'd imagine. They dig up these fresh graves, pull out the bodies, stuff them in sacks, and sell them to the anatomy schools, no questions asked. The schools needed them, so they turned a blind eye. It's this crazy, symbiotic relationship built on something totally ghoulish. It got so bad that families started taking extreme measures to protect their dead relatives. They'd build these heavy iron cages called mort safes over the graves. Some even built watchtowers in the cemeteries and hired armed guards to stand watch 24/7. Think about the level of paranoia and fear that must have existed. You go through the grief of losing someone you love, you have the funeral, you lay them to rest, and then you have to immediately worry about some ghouls digging them up to be sold for parts. It's a primal fear, a violation of something sacred. It highlights this intense conflict of the era, the desperate, almost noble pursuit of medical knowledge crashing head-on against morality, ethics, and the deepest held respect for the dead. This whole situation created the perfect breeding ground, the perfect environment for something even darker to emerge. It set the stage for two individuals who decided digging was just too much work. This is where the story takes a hard right turn from just creepy grave robbing into straight-up horror movie territory. Enter William Burke and William Hare. These weren't criminal masterminds, they weren't brilliant scientists. They were just two Irish immigrants living in a cheap lodging house in Edinburgh trying to get by. Hare ran the boarding house and Burke was one of his tenants. They were just a couple of dudes, probably drinking a lot, living on the fringes of society. Nothing about them screamed soon-to-be infamous serial killers. It all started, like a lot of bad ideas, with a financial problem. One of Hare's tenants, an old army pensioner, died of natural causes, but he still owed Hare £4 in back rent. So Hare is complaining to his buddy Burke about being out this money, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And then, a light bulb goes off. It's a real dark, messed up light bulb, but it goes off. They know about the anatomists, they know about the demand for bodies, and they know the prices they're paying. They think, wait a minute, we have a body right here. Why should we let the church have it for free when we can sell it? So, instead of reporting the death, they fill the old man's coffin with tree bark, sneak his body out of the house, and take it down to the University of Edinburgh to see a guy named Dr. Robert Knox. Dr. Robert Knox was this flamboyant, super ambitious anatomist. He was a rock star in his field, but he was also known for not asking too many questions about where his subjects came from. He just wanted the best, freshest specimens for his lectures, and he was willing to pay top dollar. So Burke and Hare show up with this body, and Knox's assistant pays them over £7. That was a huge amount of money for guys like them back then. It was more money than they'd see in months of honest work. And right there, in that moment, you can see the gears turning in their heads. They just made a huge profit, and it was easy. Way easier than digging. The problem, of course, is that people don't just drop dead in your boarding house every week. Their new, very profitable business model had a major flaw, a lack of inventory. Their first score was a fluke, a stroke of luck. But now they had a taste for the money. They realized they'd stumbled onto a shortcut to wealth, a gruesome, unethical, and completely illegal shortcut. The moral line had been crossed, and the temptation of that easy money was too strong. They weren't resurrectionists anymore. They were about to evolve into something far more sinister. They decided they wouldn't wait for people to die. They would create their own supply. This is where it gets truly chilling, man. Burke and Hare went from being opportunistic grave sellers to active predators. They started targeting the vulnerable people on the fringes of Edinburgh society. Lodgers in their house, prostitutes, drunks, people who wouldn't be missed right away. Their method was brutal and efficient. They would get their victims drunk, often luring them in with the promise of a drink or a place to stay for the night. And once the person was intoxicated and helpless, one of them would hold the victim's nose and mouth shut, while the other one laid on their chest to stop them from struggling. It was a terrifyingly intimate way to kill someone. This method, which became known as burking, was diabolically clever in its own twisted way. It left almost no marks on the body. There were no stab wounds, no signs of a struggle, no obvious evidence of foul play. To Dr. Knox and his assistants, the bodies just looked like they had died of natural causes, maybe from alcohol poisoning or some other illness common among the poor. This allowed Burke and Hare to operate for almost a year, killing at least 16 people and selling their bodies to Knox's anatomy school without raising any suspicion. It's a complete breakdown of the system, a failure on every level. You have to wonder about Dr. Knox, right? I mean, how could he not know? He's a brilliant anatomist, a guy who knows the human body inside and out. And he's getting a steady stream of perfectly fresh, unmarked bodies delivered to his door, sometimes multiple bodies a week. Did he really believe that all these people were just coincidentally dying of natural causes and ending up on his dissection table? Or was he just so blinded by his ambition, so desperate to have the best specimens for his lectures, that he chose not to see the truth? It's a classic case of willful ignorance, where it's just easier and more profitable to not ask the hard questions. The whole thing finally came crashing down when they killed their last victim, a woman named Mary Docherty. They made a mistake. They had a couple, Anne and James Gray, staying as lodgers at the same time. Burke and Hare tried to get them to leave, but the Grays became suspicious when they were told they couldn't go back to their room to get their belongings. Later, when they were finally allowed back in, they found Mary's body hidden under the bed. They went straight to the police. Hare, in a move of pure self-preservation, turned on his partner. He was offered immunity from prosecution in exchange for testifying against Burke. Burke was found guilty, hanged, and then, in a final act of poetic justice, his body was publicly dissected at the University of Edinburgh. Alright, let's get into this one, because it's a wild ride and it really makes you think about the concentration of power and what people at the highest levels are capable of. We're talking about the Titanic, The official story, we all know it. Iceberg, tragic accident, Leonardo DiCaprio freezes to death. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if the sinking of the world's most famous ship wasn't an accident at all, but a deliberate act of mass murder, orchestrated to eliminate a few key individuals who stood in the way of a monumental power grab? It sounds insane, right? Like something out of a movie. But when you start pulling on the threads, man, it gets weird. The central idea here revolves around the creation of the Federal Reserve. Today, it's just a part of the financial landscape, but back then, it was a massively controversial idea. A private central bank controlling the nation's money supply? A lot of powerful people were dead set against it. They saw it as a hostile takeover of the American economy by a small cabal of international bankers. Three of the wealthiest and most outspoken opponents were John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus. These weren't just rich guys, they were titans of industry, men with immense influence, and they were using that influence to block the formation of the Fed. So here's where it gets crazy. All three of these men, these huge obstacles to the Federal Reserve Plan, were booked on the maiden voyage of the Titanic. That's a hell of a coincidence, isn't it? But it gets even crazier. The man driving the creation of the Federal Reserve, the undisputed king of finance, was J.P. Morgan. And guess who owned the White Star Line, the company that built and operated the Titanic? J.P. Morgan. The guy who wanted these men out of the way just happened to own the very ship they were all scheduled to sail on. It's like a Bond villain plot, but it's playing out in the real world, in history. And the final piece of this puzzle, the thing that just sends a chill down your spine, J.P. Morgan himself was also scheduled to be on that maiden voyage. He had a personal suite, his name was on the passenger list, and then, at the very last minute, he canceled. So did several of his powerful friends and associates. They all just happened to have other plans. So the men who opposed the Federal Reserve all went down with the ship, and the men who wanted the Federal Reserve, including the ship's owner, all conveniently missed the boat. You don't need to be a conspiracy nut to look at that and say, whoa, hold on a second, what the hell is going on here? So, if you're going to intentionally sink a brand new state-of-the-art ship, how do you do it? How do you guarantee it goes to the bottom of the Atlantic? According to this theory, you don't. You don't sink the Titanic at all. You sink its older, damaged sister ship, the Olympic. See, the White Star Line had two of these massive vessels, nearly identical. The Olympic had been in service for about a year before the Titanic was finished, and it had a rough go. It was involved in a major collision with a Royal Navy cruiser, the HMS Hawk, and sustained serious damage to its hull. The repairs were expensive, and some say the ship never truly recovered. Its frame was permanently warped. The theory goes that the insurance payout for a damaged ship like the Olympic wouldn't be nearly enough to cover the costs and the loss of revenue. But the insurance policy on a brand new ship, the unsinkable Titanic, that was a massive payday. So the plan was allegedly hatched: switch the ships. Under the cover of the shipyard, they swapped identities. The damaged Olympic was quickly patched up and cosmetically altered to look like the Titanic, complete with the nameplate swap. Meanwhile, the brand new, pristine Titanic was quietly rebranded as the Olympic and would go on to have a long, uneventful career. The public would never know the difference. Think about the logistics of it. It sounds impossible, but these ships were in the same shipyard in Belfast, being worked on by the same people. They were virtually identical to the untrained eye. It would have been a massive undertaking requiring incredible secrecy and the complicity of hundreds of workers, but is it impossible? When you're talking about the kind of money and power that J.P. Morgan wielded, the lines of what's possible start to get very blurry. You're not asking a favor, you're giving an order. People's livelihoods, their entire careers would depend on keeping their mouths shut. It's an audacious plan, but it solves a lot of problems for the people at the top. So, the ship that set sail from Southampton on April 10, 1912, wasn't the pinnacle of modern engineering. It was a wounded beast, a ship that had already been in a major wreck, now sent out into the North Atlantic with a secret mission. It wasn't just carrying passengers, it was carrying a death sentence for a select few and a massive insurance claim for its owners. The passengers, the crew, the whole world thought they were witnessing the maiden voyage of the Titanic, a symbol of progress and human ingenuity. But if this theory is true, they were unknowingly aboard a floating coffin, a damaged vessel sailing towards a planned rendezvous with disaster. Okay, so you've swapped the ships. You've got your targets on board the damaged vessel disguised as the Titanic. Now what? You still need to sink it, and you need it to look like an accident. This is where the captain comes in, Edward Smith. He was the most senior captain in the White Star Line, a man they called the millionaire's captain. He was supposed to retire after this one last voyage. The theory suggests that he was a key part of the plot, a man who was either bribed or coerced into following a very specific set of orders: go full speed, through an ice field at night, ignoring all warnings. Think about that. Captain Smith received multiple, specific warnings about a massive ice field directly in his path. This isn't speculation, it's documented fact. Standard procedure, common sense, every rule of seamanship dictates that you slow down in those conditions, especially at night. But Smith ordered the ship to maintain its high speed. Why? Was it hubris? Was he trying to set a speed record? Or was he following orders from the man who owned the ship, J.P. Morgan, to deliberately place the vessel in harm's way? It's a chilling thought that the man entrusted with over 2,200 souls was actively steering them towards their doom. Then there's the issue of the flares. When the ship was sinking, they fired off distress flares. But they were white flares, not the standard red flares used for emergencies. White flares were used to signal we are having a party or all is well. There was another ship nearby, the SS Californian, that saw the flares, but its captain interpreted them as non-urgent signals from some rich people having a good time. They saw a ship firing rockets and then stopping and disappearing, but because they weren't red, they didn't go to investigate until it was too late. Was this a tragic mistake or a deliberate choice to ensure that any potential rescue would be delayed? And finally, the lifeboats. It's one of the most infamous details of the whole tragedy. There weren't enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Why would a brand new, top-of-the-line ship, the supposed pinnacle of safety, have such a glaring, fatal flaw? The official reason was outdated regulations. But in the context of this conspiracy, it looks sinister. If you're planning to sink a ship to kill a few specific people, you need chaos. You need panic. You need to ensure that in the scramble for survival, your targets don't make it off. A limited number of lifeboats creates the perfect storm of confusion and terror to ensure the plan succeeds, with the massive loss of life as tragic but acceptable collateral damage. Alright, buckle up for this one because we're leaving Earth and we're heading to the moon. We've all looked up at it, right? It's just there. It controls the tides, it lights up the night sky, it's been the subject of poetry and wonder since the dawn of humanity. But what if it's not what we think it is? What if that big, beautiful rock in the sky isn't a rock at all? What if it's an artificial structure, a hollow, metallic sphere, placed in our orbit by, well, that's the big question, isn't it? By who or what? It sounds like the plot of a sci-fi movie, but there are some genuinely strange pieces of data that have led people down this rabbit hole. The whole thing really kicked off during the Apollo missions. In 1969, the Apollo 12 crew, after they landed, deliberately jettisoned their lunar module ascent stage, crashing it back onto the moon's surface. It was part of a seismic experiment. They had placed seismometers on the surface to measure moonquakes and impacts, to learn about the moon's internal structure. When the module hit, something completely unexpected happened. The moon rang. It rang like a bell. For over an hour, scientists were baffled. The vibrations just kept going and going as if the moon was hollow. Think about what happens when you strike a solid object like a rock or a bowling ball. You get a dull thud. The vibrations dissipate very quickly. But if you strike a hollow object like a bell or a big metal tank, it resonates, it rings. And that's exactly what the moon did. Dr. Frank Press from MIT said it was quite beyond the range of our experience. A small impact, equivalent to about a ton of TNT, made the whole moon reverberate in a way that just doesn't make sense for a solid, rocky body. It was the first major piece of evidence that made some people go, wait a minute, what is this thing, really? This wasn't a one-off event either. The Apollo 13 mission had its own famous problems, and they had to crash their massive Saturn V third stage into the moon. This was a much bigger impact, over 11 tons, and the same thing happened, only more intensely. This time the moon rang for over 3 hours, with vibrations traveling to a depth of 25 miles. NASA scientists were quoted as saying the moon reacted like a gong. It's this ringing bell phenomenon that forms the cornerstone of the hollow moon theory. How can a solid celestial body supposedly made of rock and dust behave like a giant hollow metallic sphere? So you've got this moon that rings like a bell, which is weird enough, but then you start looking at its physical properties and its relationship with the Earth and the Sun, and the strangeness just stacks up. Let's talk about its orbit. The moon's orbit around the Earth is almost a perfect circle. That's extremely unusual for a natural satellite. Most moons have elliptical or oval-shaped orbits, but our moon just happens to be in this incredibly stable, nearly circular path. It's almost too perfect, too neat, like it was placed there with incredible precision. Then you get to the really mind-blowing part, the perfect solar eclipse. The moon is about 400 times smaller than the sun. But, by a staggering coincidence, it's also about 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun is. This means that from our perspective here on Earth, they appear to be the exact same size in the sky. This is what allows for a total solar eclipse, where the moon slides perfectly over the sun, covering its disk completely and allowing us to see the solar corona. The mathematical odds of a natural satellite and its star having this precise size-to-distance ratio are astronomical. It happens nowhere else in our solar system with this perfection. It's a coincidence of such epic proportions that it makes you question whether it's a coincidence at all. It's like finding a watch on the beach, as the old saying goes. You don't assume the sand and waves randomly assembled it, you assume it had a designer. The moon's relationship with the sun is so precise, so mathematically elegant, that it feels engineered. It feels like it was designed to be viewed from Earth. But for what purpose? Why would some advanced intelligence put this celestial object in such a specific spot, just so we could witness this beautiful astronomical event? It's a question that opens up a whole universe of speculation. And there's more. The moon is tidally locked with the Earth, which means we only ever see one side of it. The dark side of the moon isn't actually dark, it gets just as much sunlight. We just never see it from Earth. Again, this is not unheard of for moons, but when you add it to the perfect orbit and the perfect eclipses, it starts to feel less like a series of cosmic coincidences and more like a set of deliberately designed features. It's as if the moon was put there, locked in place, with one side permanently facing us, and the other side, well, the other side hidden from view. What might be on the side we're not meant to see. So if the moon is an artificial construct, what's it made of? When the Apollo astronauts brought back moon rocks, the analysis turned up some really weird stuff. For one, the rocks contained processed metals like brass, mica, and pure titanium. Titanium is an incredibly strong, lightweight, and corrosion-resistant metal, perfect for building advanced aerospace structures. But it requires immense heat and advanced technology to refine into its pure form. Finding it naturally occurring in rocks on the moon is, to say the least, highly unusual. It's not impossible, but it's another one of those things that makes you go, Then there's the density issue. The moon is way less dense than it should be. The Earth's average density is about 5.5 grams per cubic centimeter. The moon's is only 3.3 grams per cubic centimeter. That's a huge difference. Scientists explain this by saying the moon has a very small iron core or no core at all, but if it's a hollow structure with a thick metallic outer shell, that would also perfectly explain the low overall density. The math works out. A hollow sphere would be much lighter than a solid one. And the numbers we see for the moon's density fit that model surprisingly well. This leads to the big question of where the moon even came from. The leading scientific theory is the giant impact hypothesis, which says that a Mars-sized planet named Theia smashed into the early Earth, and the debris from that collision eventually coalesced to form the moon. It's a decent theory, but it has problems. It doesn't fully explain the moon's strange orbit or its chemical composition, so if it wasn't formed from the Earth, where did it come from? The artificial moon theory posits that it's not from around here at all. It's a vessel, a spaceship, a monitoring station that was piloted into our orbit long, long ago. Two Soviet scientists, Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov, published an article in the 1970s laying out this exact hypothesis. They argued that the moon is an ancient planetoid that was hollowed out by an advanced intelligence, filled with fuel for its journey, and fitted with a tough metallic outer hull made from processed rock and titanium. They suggested it was a kind of Noah's Ark that traveled through the cosmos, and was parked in Earth's orbit for reasons unknown. It's a wild, incredible theory. But when you look at how the moon rings like a bell, its perfect orbit, and its strange composition, you have to admit, it's a fascinating puzzle that's far from solved. So that's it for this video. A trip through some of history's most fascinating and disturbing rabbit holes. From the halls of power and the depths of the Atlantic, to the surface of our own moon, these stories challenge what we think we know. They force us to ask uncomfortable questions about power, control, and the nature of reality itself. Are they all true? I don't know, probably not, but are they all just crazy talk from people with tinfoil hats? I don't think so. The evidence in some of these cases is compelling, and the questions they raise are legitimate. The world is a complicated and often bizarre place, and the official story isn't always the whole story. History is written by the victors, as they say, and sometimes the truth gets buried, distorted, or deliberately hidden from view. It's easy to dismiss these ideas as conspiracy theories, to just laugh them off and go back to our daily lives. But I think there's value in questioning the narrative. There's value in looking at the anomalies, the coincidences that are just too perfect, the events that just don't add up, and having the courage to ask, what's really going on here? Thinking for yourself is a powerful act. It's what drives progress. It's what uncovers corruption. It's what keeps us from being led blindly. Whether you believe J.P. Morgan sank the Titanic, or that the moon is a giant spaceship, the act of investigating, of weighing the evidence and coming to your own conclusions, is what matters. Don't just accept what you're told. Dig deeper, read everything, listen to all sides, be skeptical but keep an open mind. The search for truth is a journey, not a destination, and it's one of the most important journeys we can take. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming along on this wild ride and being willing to explore the strange and the unexplained. Keep questioning, keep thinking, and keep searching for the truth wherever it may lead you. It's out there. Take care of yourselves, be good to each other, and we'll see you next time.